I've talked on the podcast as well as you and I have talked a lot outside of the podcast about Christopher Nolan's Tenet. We went and saw it. This was a movie that we anticipated for a long time, ever since like the trailers dropped like the year before, looking forward to it. The delays, coronavirus, so much up in the air around the film. Finally went and saw it. We've talked about the film. I'm not here to talk about the film today, but we've hit a point where there's kind of a consensus on how the film did at the box office, as well as implications for theaters and films as a whole. And Christopher Nolan has finally spoken. I hate to say finally, like we're just like anxiously awaiting his statement, but he's finally, I believe he did an interview in which they talked a little bit about the success of the film. And I adored Tenet. I really love that movie. It was a great experience. I'm really glad I went to see it. I'm so thankful that it got released, even amid coronavirus and all of the restrictions. But in the end, it has done around $350 million in box office. I don't know if you've seen that number.
Worldwide, yeah.
Yeah, worldwide.
Right.
And I guess that's as it's coming to the end of its run. He has come out, and I'll just read the quote that Nolan said. He said, when this is regarding the 350 million, because people are pretty much there's a debate on whether that's a good number or a bad number, and that's why I really don't like where this is going, because I think Nolan says it best here. That's why I'm going to read the exact words. He says, "I am worried that the studios are drawing the wrong conclusions from our release, that rather than looking at where the film has worked well and how that can provide them with much needed revenue, they're looking at where it hasn't lived up to pre-COVID expectations, and they're going to start using that as an excuse to make exhibition take the losses from the pandemic instead of getting in the game and adapting or rebuilding our business, in other words." And he hits it right. He hits the nail right on the head, because honestly, like even before it was at 350 million worldwide, obviously like it didn't do great on release because of the restrictions. There were so many theaters that weren't even showing. I mean, we had to drive 2.5 hours just to get to a theater that would show it. And then obviously the reduced capacities, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. It's going to be lower. But like that being said, with how bad things have been with coronavirus, I wouldn't say that I was just impressed with the numbers. But even like in the first few weekends, I was like, oh, it's making some money. Maybe there's some hope.
Well, it did absolutely abysmal in the US. Like almost like the majority of that 350 million was overseas. Like if you look at the actual domestic numbers, it was like,
really?
It was.
I think didn't it do awful. Around 50 in the first like weekend or two?
I want to say it did like 40 or 50.
I remember it was like 47, 46 million.
I'm not entirely sure. I don't want to. I don't know this for a fact, but I don't even think it made it to 100 million in the US.
Really?
I'm pretty sure almost all of that came from overseas. And that's where it's a bad sign. Now, Nolan's from the UK, so when he's talking about the success of it, he is talking a little bit more about like, Europe and those areas, whereas in the US it did like almost nothing.
Okay.
So that's the main, that's why people are calling it such a failure, is because it really was a absolute bomb here.
But I guess like my point is that exactly what he says, and that I don't like the idea that we're looking at it through the lens of pre-COVID numbers that we could do. I think it's a really bad idea for theaters, for the art form and for the business, for them to be sitting back in their executive studios and being like, we're just not going to put out any more movies until this is all ready. Then adapt. Right. I don't like the fact that they seem unwilling, even in his own words, like these studios seem unwilling to adapt and put these movies out and figure out how to progress the business or to rebuild like that. The perfect wording from Nolan, to rebuild the business, to figure out how to get this revenue. Like, because yes, these are bad numbers in comparison to old numbers, but amid COVID, I mean, people were not going out of their house. They're still not going out of their house. You're still not allowed to in most places. There's really nothing you can even do here where we live. People are still scared, and rightfully so in a lot of cases, to go out. So I don't even look at like the success or the failure of it in the US and be like, that was bad. I'm just like, that's coronavirus. It had nothing to do with the film. Everyone knows that.
I mean the movie was projected to be a massive hit.
Yeah.
It wasn't like it's certainly not the movie's fault that it wasn't a hit. And yeah, I don't like people pretending that it was a failure in the normal sense. It's
I just don't like these
labels. It was a failure entirely because of COVID.
Yeah.
But also the movie, I can't remember the budget, but it was like a couple $100 million.
Mm-hmm.
It was insanely high budget. Then you factor in marketing to that. And so, yeah, they didn't come close to making back they didn't come close to making much of a profit off of them.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, I mean, technically the numbers are bad in that sense. But the issue is that Tenet, how bad Tenet did specifically in the US, made all these other studios push back their movies. So when they pushed back their movies, theaters were just starting to open in most places. So theaters finally open, and all these movies go, oh, well, we're actually not releasing. So now they're starving theaters, and theaters are not going to be able to make it if they can't release new movies. Like, our theater's open right now.
Mm-hmm.
We haven't been once.
Yeah, if there was a movie to watch, I could be there.
Nothing's come out.
Yeah. I just don't think it's a good move. And like he said, obviously the coronavirus affected the numbers, and obviously the numbers are bad comparatively to old numbers. But that being said, I'm impressed with the numbers amid coronavirus, because I'm looking at no movies at all.
I was shocked by the numbers overseas.
So the idea that it made any money at all, I think that it would be a better idea for these studios to look at it and go, we need to make any kind of money. We need to rebuild this. Because the other thing is, like, one thing that I worry about is not really waiting for movies. Now, movies are such cultural tentpoles that obviously I don't think they're just ever going to go away. But I think that the damage that's being done to the medium, and you could say that through the quality of the medium, from streaming services to theaters, or just the medium in general, and whether or not people are watching movies versus shows, or how many people are watching movies in general. The damage that it's doing to the medium by not allowing people to consume it, I think that's going to be something that's regrettable. Mm-hmm. I think that you need to start rebuilding the business, trying to figure out what's going on and how you can make some money and move forward, rather than just sitting on your hands. Because I'm not an expert on this, and I don't want to, make an invalid claim, but I think you can look at the sports industry. And I'm not saying it's exactly the same, but we didn't have sports for a lot of this time during COVID, and we only just got them back. And now I'm not a big sports ball watcher, but that being said, the numbers are not looking good. Mm-hmm. Like, sports came back. They're doing championships. They're doing playoffs, basketball, football, baseball. Obviously, people can't fill the stands. Obviously, it's going to be a little less hype around them but I think one of the things that the way that this correlates to the film industry is that sports were a part of the culture. It was what you did, maybe not us, but like people that enjoy sports watch the game on Saturday, on Sunday. They follow these things, and taking that away for months at a time, what people did was, on a whole, I think is a indicator as to why they may not be doing as well now, is that people found other things to do.
Yeah.
They, how humans get used to their routines. They switch into these different routines. They adapt, and people adapted to not having sports. And now that you've given them back, I don't think people were just sitting on their hands like, we don't have any sports. They figured out what to do. And I worry that, with film already it's obviously a big business, but theaters especially have declined over the past years. And yes, people are still watching Netflix. They're, watching a lot of shows, but I'd say long form films are not doing as well as they have in the past. And I think it's a bad idea to let the medium slip out of the public eye.
Right.
For an extended period of time.
Well, the issue is that they're giving people new release movies on streaming services. People are going to get used to that, and they're not going to want to go back to theaters.
They already don't.
Right.
Yeah.
So the longer and longer you do that, people start going, well, why isn't Tenet on a streaming service? Well, nobody needs to be watching Tenet on a streaming service.
Yeah.
Sorry. Nobody needs to. It's the
worst
worst
physically
possible way
hurt
to
me
watch
trying
a movie.
to watch it. Like, I don't think I ever want to watch the movie again. I don't think I can watch
I'd
it
watch
on
it.
TV.
I'd watch it now, knowing the theater experience.
Yeah,
but
I don't. But I think I would just be thinking the whole time about how it didn't live up.
Yeah, but the idea of it being the first time you see it on a streaming service, or even wanting it to be the first time you see it on a streaming service, is just absurd. Because it's so dependent on a theater experience. Like I thought the movie was really good. I wasn't as in love with it as you. I'd say it was a good movie and an amazing theater experience to me. Mm-hmm. I don't think I would have liked it as much if I'd seen it at home first. But yeah, I think people are getting so used to the streaming service thing. Universal's got their video on demand deal going on. Or I don't know when they're implementing that, but where movies will go to streaming, their movies will go to streaming services like 17 days after release.
That is not long enough.
Yeah. Now, right now it's only Universal movies, but I feel like pretty soon it'll be other studios doing that. And I mean, the reason they're doing it is because if they can't guarantee a profit in theaters, and we talked about how No Time to Die was Netflix offered like $300 million for it. Mm-hmm. So you got a big blockbuster that can't guarantee that they're going to make what they need to make. Netflix says, we'll offer you $300 million for it. That's guaranteed $300 million, instead of taking the risk of, releasing it and it just not doing anything. So the issue is that they got guaranteed money over here. And then they got this risk of a declining industry. Mm-hmm. Studios are always going to choose the guaranteed money, unless you have somebody behind it like Nolan or Tarantino who's really pushing the theater release. They're always going to go with the guaranteed money. I mean, even David Fincher's new movie is going to Netflix. I don't know if it was always intended to go to Netflix or whether it was supposed to go to theaters and Netflix bought it.
They've already been going to Netflix, even before COVID stuff, even before theaters, more movies were going. Yeah.
And I just see people getting used to it if theaters don't come back in a big way soon. Yeah. And I don't see them coming back in a big way soon.
And yeah, and I think obviously like we as absolute, like theater experience lovers are not going to like that. Yeah. That being said, outside of, our experience, there are plenty of people who like that. Like I'm just looking at the actual studios. If they want to preserve this experience, they're going to have to do something. Yeah. They have to play a active role in preserving the experience, I guess, because people are going to accept it. People like you and I that really, really, really want theaters, it's the numbers aren't comparable to the people that just want to watch Netflix. Mm-hmm. So if they want to save this industry, the people who make the money on the industry, they have to pick their feet up and move. But I'm not saying that theaters need to just go into the red, like just dump a bunch of money into a dying industry or into, the economy of films and theaters for no reason, for no return. I'm just saying that it seems, at least to the public eye, like their strategy is to have no strategy at all, to just wait it out. Yeah. And I think that is going to eat them alive.
Yeah. No, I think they're just playing into streaming services for sure. Yeah. Because it's guaranteed money right now. And I think as long as it's guaranteed money, they're going to continue. I don't think that they have any attachments to theaters whatsoever. I think if theaters were guaranteeing them more money than streaming services, they would absolutely be releasing in theaters. But right now they're not. So I think unless something switches back, hopefully, I think the best outcome is that hopefully coronavirus can be under control in the near future and people can feel safe going to theaters, because they showed that even in the areas where theaters were open, people weren't going to see Tenet, and it was because of COVID. Yeah. And I think if you can get to where people feel safe enough to go to theaters again, and you start releasing the big blockbusters like they're planning to in the spring, like I think A Quiet Place 2 is trying to release in the spring, No Time to Die, and I think a couple other big blockbusters are trying to release in the spring. I think if you can get people to go back then and get some good numbers, I think that'll be the saving grace for theaters. I'm not sure the likelihood of that happening, though. I hope it does.
Yeah.
I really hope it
Everything is up in the air right now, but definitely just an interesting time. I mean, I don't think there's any like right answer, as much as we're criticizing the industry or the studios, it's there's so many lose-lose situations. I think I'm always going to err on the side of trying to figure things out, trying to innovate, trying to move forward. And I don't like the way that they're handling it right now. I feel like there's got to be a way forward. But that being said, it's not my millions of dollars that's on the line.
Yeah. Yeah,
so
right.
I don't like not understand why they do what they do. But